if you talk to any creative person, to have somebody who means the world to you saying, do what you want to do, be who you want to be right now, and I'm going to witness you and I'm going to encourage you, that's all you can hope for. And you get
Right.
that sort of stuff from your parents maybe, but by this time in our lives, parents are off and they're kind of more critical than they are when you're kids.
Mhm.
So as an adult person, to have this kind of muse person in your orbit who's both putting the subject matter in and pulling it out in terms of appreciation for the songs that you're writing was game changing for me, I think.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Awesome, awesome. I'm Adam, by the way, and this is about you and your journey in music. And I want to talk to you, obviously, about the album you just put out.
Okay, cool. That sounds good.
Awesome. And I've had another member of your band on before. I've had Jono was on with Darren
Okay.
for Joda.
Right. Okay, great.
So yeah, so I've got his story, but I'm intrigued, obviously, to hear yours um and talk to you about this album, which is incredible.
Thank you very much.
Yes. First off, where were you born and raised, Tony?
I was born and raised in London, and I sort of lived here most of my life. I went to university at Bristol, so I was away there for 3 years. And since joining Above and Beyond, I live at Heathrow Airport most of the time.
I bet, right?
Yeah.
Do you come from a musical family or creative household?
My dad was played the piano and was got some piano qualifications. I think was a piano teacher of sorts, but I think only in terms of teaching people in people's houses. There was always music in the house. I think my mum and my dad both loved different kinds of music, and me and my brother ended up being in bands when we were younger. That's my sort of first foray into um, uh, music, and making music was making music with a guitar. And my brother and I were sort of very much sort of joined at the hip in doing that, and made a little band with a friend of ours, and ended up joining two halves of the same band. The band called Sad Lovers and Giants split up, and my brother joined one half and I joined the other half. So we sort of shared a kind of musical journey there.
That's awesome. And did you take lessons from your dad for piano, or did he
I
make you
think
guys take it?
I think he tried to teach us, and he did teach us certain things, but he wasn't around. He was a postman, so he kind of worked late. So he wasn't really around to do that kind of thing, and we weren't rich enough to have piano lessons or anything like that. So it was a thing that kind of remained dormant, I think, until sort of post puberty, when the idea of getting up in front of people suddenly became very exciting. I think that kind of drive to be seen, to say something that you felt like you needed to say, which very much goes along with adolescence. I think there is this kind of burst of sort of self development, ego development. Suddenly you start seeing yourself in a kind of clearer focus than you'd done maybe in your early teens. And the idea of music and performing and joining this group of people who were talking to us, I guess, that became very exciting to me. The idea of the idea of having something to say. Obviously, you think you've got something to say, but for it to kind of to put it into practice,
Sure.
musically, I think was a really important sort of drive, both for my brother and myself. And I still play with Sad Lovers and Giants. It's
Mhm.
been a almost constant. There was a time where Jono played keyboards for us on one little tour that we did, and Parvo did the live sound. So that the two bands have interlinked, but it's an entirely separate thing. I don't really deal with Sad Lovers and Giants on my social media, because I like it to keep pure, for the
Mhm.
fans to be people that find it through itself, rather than people who are sort of tipping in from above and beyond, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Well, obviously a little bit different than what you're doing with Above and Beyond. So
Just a
that
little.
makes sense. With Sad Lovers and Giants, like was that you said you joined with your brother? Were you guys in a band prior? Like how do you end up then joining up with the other guys? You said a couple of them quit, I
I,
think
I
is what you
I'd
said.
been in a band before. He hadn't. The bit of the band that he joined was called the Snake Horn. He joined before I joined the bit of the band that ended up calling itself Sad Lovers and Giants again. So
Okay.
I ended up being in the bit with the singer. So it wasn't too long till we decided to call ourselves Sad Lovers and Giants. But our time being in bands together was just rehearsals in places together, playing Cure songs and having a
Okay.
laugh, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and with like lyrics and singing, like you weren't singing for that
No,
band.
no. I mean,
So
that's the weird thing. I think I was writing songs in my spare time, all the while through Sad Lovers and Giants, but it didn't really sort of that thing didn't really sort of start properly until this album. This album really sort of marks the sort of the spring, if you like, of my songwriting career, because Sad Lovers and Giants, my job is to do the music only, and the singer is the voice of Sad Lovers and Giants. And so
mhm.
I never really felt like saying, you could change that word, you could change that word. I don't think that's
Right.
I think bands have a voice, and it's important to maintain that voice, to maintain a kind of a constant relationship with the band. If you're, I love, I don't know, there's not that many bands left. It's all solo artists now, but I love Crowded House, and I still love Crowded House. And they've put together this kind of super group with the Suns in, and
Mhm.
it's still a very viable concern. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that it was the original singer, then it wouldn't mean anything. But actually, it means a hell of a lot, because it's that voice, it's that personality, it's that character that you invest in emotionally, and you want to keep that relationship. It's like a friend, and I think that's really important to the success of Above and Beyond, which maybe we'll come on to later. I think we've managed, in a world that chops and changes singers, it seems like just like books of matches.
Mhm.
Above and Beyond has had the same voice pretty much for 25 years, the same small number of singer contributors, um,
Mhm.
and songwriters, and I think it's enabled us to be like a band, um, even though some of those elements are external to the three of us. And I think that's actually really important. And part of my voice was the bit that was kind of fired in the crucible of these songs and my relationship with this girl called Shelley from America, which is where the Salt album really comes from, and why I felt like it was a good thing to put out, because I think for me sort of was a time when I was kind of getting my ducks in order in terms of being what kind of songs I wanted to write, how I was going to write them. I think the songs of Above and Beyond and the songs on Salt are on slightly different level. There's a bigger room to play to with Above and Beyond, and consequently the choruses are a lot bigger,
Mhm.
more imploring, I think more emotional in a kind of that kind of a way, if you know what I mean. Whereas I
Sure.
think Salt is a lot more personal. It's me singing to somebody sitting across the bed from me, and I think in some ways you can sort of hear that in the songs. I'm still very proud of them, but they don't feel like Above and Beyond songs for that reason.
Yeah. So you said that this album Salt was your first real like what endeavor in writing and singing your own songs, or like when you put
Well, I
this
mean, it was the first time that anybody had ever asked me to do that. I mean, quite literally. I mean, it's a funny thing when you think, when I've been telling this story now for a few months with the album coming out, but Shelley one night said to me, "Go and get your guitar and sing to me." And that, I mean, it sounds so innocent and so obvious, but actually, if you talk to any creative person, to have somebody who means the world to you saying, do what you do what you want to do, be who you want to be right now, and I'm going to witness you and I'm going to encourage you, that's all you can hope for. And you get
right.
that sort of stuff from your parents maybe, but by this time in our lives, parents are off, and they're kind of more critical than they are when you're kids.
Mhm.
So as an adult person, to have this kind of muse person in your orbit who's both putting the subject matter in and pulling it out in terms of appreciation for the songs that you're writing was game changing for me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found myself over the time when she was living with me, sitting and singing with the guitar like it was the most natural thing in the world, which it wasn't. Again, Sad Lovers and Giants, I'm playing arpeggios. I play 60,000 notes a night on average. But I don't sing the songs. It's just a new thing for me to be there with a guitar and singing these songs. So it was an endorsement of that voice that I'd been kind of playing with in my spare time, but also a honing of that voice. I think the thing that strikes me about these songs is that they are about my life and they're about real things that are really happening. And I think to have the courage to put yourself into a song and perform it to somebody, that again was a little step along the way to where I am with Above and Beyond, which is to put a lot of my life in those songs. I think before that I'd been of the opinion, I think a lot of singers don't sing about themselves. A lot of singers write stories, like little novels, they're little short stories. I know Michael Stipe famously said, don't mistake the singer for the song.
Yeah.
It's not inevitable that you would write about yourself. You might write about something you find extraordinary that you read in the paper, or a short story, as I did with Carry Me Home. Carry Me Home is based on the first chapter of a book called A Fairy Tale of New York by J.P. Donleavy.
Oh, okay.
Which obviously was an inspiration for a Pogue song, which became their big Christmas hit.
Yeah.
Which is nothing to do with the story of the song. The story of the book is the story of a man who brings his wife's body home from his honeymoon in Ireland to New York. It's a very sad opening, becomes very hilarious. I would recommend it. It's very good.
Okay. Wow. Well, so having heard Shelley say, "Do what you do," right? I want you to sing songs to me, and you being not that's vulnerable for you to do that too, right? I mean, I could see that that wasn't your forte in the band. It was
No.
just so now it's like, okay, well, here's some songs, and then not only that, you're singing them to the person you said a lot of the
Yeah.
material is about too.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, here's these songs, and they're about you, and you're gonna sit across from me and hear exactly how I'm feeling and how I wrote it down. I mean, that
and I
takes
think
a lot of courage.
it did. I think the thing that you'd need to, I would need to say about Shelley is that she was, and the reason why we're not in touch, she lived life in a very unique way. She was herself in every social circumstance. She didn't blow smoke up anybody's ass. She didn't suffer fools. She said exactly what she felt. She told you exactly how she was feeling about stuff, but stuff didn't upset her. So I get pretty close to the bone in some of these songs, especially Cleaning.
Mhm.
I'd say paints a picture of somebody. This is that was written about when she'd gone back and was. Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into detail about what the song's about because it's very, it's very descriptive and very personal.
Mhm.
But it's not, it's not a glorious portrait of somebody. It's somebody with all of their faults and traits there. And
Sure.
she loved
Yeah.
it. I think she respected that I was being honest, and I think to have somebody who wants you to sing, but to have somebody who's actually okay with what you say, that's a big deal, actually, because I know I've had other relationships with people who are desperate to be in a song. Please write a song about me. And then you kind of do. And, but you can feel that there is this kind of desire to be portrayed in a particular way in it, which is why it's often easier to include somebody in a song once a relationship is finished because they don't get to bite back. The unique thing about Shelley and the unique thing about writing this record was that she was there and she contributed. I mean, she wrote the chorus to Baby Doll White, which is,
Wow.
I think, it was just a very wonderful, collaborative, encouraging muse experience that I have yet to repeat in my life. I mean, I think there have been other people who've come into my life, other girls that I've had relationships with, friends, artists, bandmates who inspire me in certain ways. But I think the mix of elements that was there then was the reason why suddenly from, one song every 9 months or whatever it was that I was writing, there was suddenly like 9 in 3 months.
Mhm.
Um, and and I think that was when I started to think, okay, this is something I can do. This is something I can take this story, this event, these events that have happened, and sometimes the same events inspire different songs. I mean, Salt is the same story as Biker Babe's the same story as Baby Doll White. They are the same sort of things happening, but you think about a different way of talking about them, and that's really what songs teach you to do, because there are only so many words, there are only so
Mhm.
many things that you can sing about. The art or the craft, whichever it is to pick different words to say something that people can relate to, even though they've never heard the words before. They recognize what it's about. That's I think what songwriting is, as in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's interesting that you said, a lot of people are like, "Oh, write a song about me," and that basically means write a song about how great, write a song about me making me look awesome, right? Or
Yeah,
making me look like I'm the greatest person ever, or how much
yeah,
you or love me, or whatever it may be. But to just write a song about someone without that lens on, just
yeah,
here's the song and then present it
yeah,
to them,
yeah.
not in a positive way
And I
necessarily
and I
on
and I,
every
and I
one of
think
them.
as listeners, we respond instantly when there is some honesty in that. I think one of the reasons why somebody that I used to know was such a big hit was
Mhm.
because the girl got to answer back. It
Yes.
wasn't
Yeah,
it
yeah, with
wasn't just this
Kimbra's
tirade
response.
against, it wasn't just this tirade against somebody, which is that's easy. There are 100, there's 10 a penny, those songs. There are loads and loads and loads of those. But to have the honesty and guts and courage to have the girl actually answer back in similarly degrading terms
Right.
was a masterstroke. And that, I think, one of the reasons why that song was such a big hit for the guy whose
Oh,
name I now,
Gautier.
and Gautier, of course.
Yeah.
And I loved that album. I thought the album was extraordinary. I don't know what he's done since, sadly, but I think
I heard he basically is upset he wrote that song because it basically just, kind of pinned him in a one point, and then he just didn't really have much, but I don't know the truth
I can
behind it.
I can no I can see that. It's like, I think it's like Alanis Morissette. Alanis Morissette did the Angry Girlfriend before anybody had really done it,
Right, right.
and blew up because that was, a voice that people needed to have. People, when you're in that situation, you need a shoulder to cry on, or a balloon to punch, or whatever it is. And I think the way that she did that with that record, it
Yeah,
just
Jagged
gave
Little
her this.
Pill. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an incredible, incredible moment. I think the problem was that she again ran out of that personality. She didn't want to be trapped there.
Right.
And I think the only person, well, not the only person, but Adele has managed to make a career of being that person. She manages to time her writing and her recording and releasing in these times where she's going through difficult periods with a man, and manages to have this continuity of voice and this incredible career with all of these kind of sad breakup songs. And full credit to her. I think she manages to stay in there, and I guess maybe Gautier didn't manage to stay in that place, or didn't want to be in that place.
Right, because then you're just known as, "Oh, it's the somebody I used to know guy," right? You know what I mean? I could see how that could get frustrating in a way, but
Yeah.
then again, you also have a huge hit that people would die to have as
Well, yeah,
well.
exactly. Exactly.
It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Um, so with Salt and having these songs and, you record them. What? I mean, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, this was
So
me
you
thinking, outside of Sad Lovers and Giants, which I think maybe had stopped at this point. I had stopped.
you had stopped
Um,
Sellers Giants at that
yeah, no,
point? Okay.
we broke up. The old record company stopped. So Sad Lovers and Giants had kind of stopped in like 93 or something. So 94 comes along. I meet Shelley. I'm thinking this could be my next musical thing. And so to get Bob Bradley was the producer, who was a friend of mine who I'd been in a band with before, an incredibly talented musician and producer, a producer the likes of which I'd never experienced personally before. I was working at Warner, so I'd been to see a lot of producers in action, and I didn't really understand where the band ends and the producer begins. It's a really interesting it's a really interesting podcast, I would say. You have these people who just sit there and wisely make decisions, but then you have these other people who play the piano for the intro and play the drums and program the drums and actually make a sound canvas, much like Above and Beyond does. Above and Beyond, as a production team, makes all of the music. We don't just all sit there and have somebody else make it and sit and
right 100%.
producers, but Bob was a bit of both. He was very hands-on. He was able to make these soundscapes. Get the drum kit was always the first, get the drums down, get the bass down, get the guide vocal down, the acoustic guitar, and then we start adding these other bits and pieces. But he was as adept at getting a great performance out of me and encouraging me and just telling me everything I was doing was great. As he was coming up with great bass lines and great keyboard parts and funny little backing vocal things that we used to do together, which we would perform to the same mic, looking at each other, never straight. I would say most of the album was done inebriated in some way or form. I'm not going to get too descriptive on how, but it was a hugely enjoyable kind of another great relationship thing. Shelley had gone by now. This was him indulging me with these songs and with my voice, neither of which he needed to endorse or feel anything for, but we were just really good friends and he had the time. And we recorded them, and I thought this was going to be my next musical thing. And then Above and Beyond happened. So,
because you were working at Warner Records at the time, right? You were doing marketing, and then, but you were always obviously a musician and an artist, and that's what you were doing. As far as
it was. Actually, being in a major label was a great place for getting advice for people, because you're seeing artists all the time, and they're all, even successful artists are one step away from before they were successful. So, even if you're talking to Seal about music or anybody, they can remember when they were busking or whatever it is they're doing. They don't, they're not aloof all the time.
Right. So he doesn't know he doesn't live his life as rose on a.
No, exactly.
Yeah. It's just he remembers the hard times.
It was. It was great, and William Orbit was a great source of advice, and Egg White, also another Warner artist who plays piano on Carry Me Home and recorded the original demo. All of these guys were people that I was kind of working with, but they were helping me. So when Above and Beyond started to look like it might be something, I was getting a lot of help and advice from these guys. And so when we did the Madonna remix, for example, which was basically me exploiting a relationship with the manager and a little bit with Madonna to get a chance to do it on spec. The guy who'd actually produced it, whose name escapes me at the moment, he was an artist that was signed to Warner's in a different guise. So we managed to get all of the parts from him, not just the ones that we would have probably got from Warner Brothers, which would have been the vocal. Right. So it was a really great time to be starting Above and Beyond. I was getting lots of great advice and lots of contacts with work, getting in touch and asking us to do remixes. So it came out of, I don't think Above and Beyond would have been able to start if I hadn't been working at Warner's at the time. But then all of this stuff happened, and these Salt tracks, they just sat on these eight track tapes. And weeks went by, and Above and Beyond became busier and busier and busier. And I thought, well, there's no need for this thing. And then eventually the tape machine that I'd recorded them on broke. And I thought, well, I don't know what to do about that. And then I think like 10 years went by and I said to Bob, I'd love to finish Salt, well, what should we do about it? And he was like, yeah, we should, why didn't you get the tapes transferred? So I think 2011, I got the tapes transferred to the digital medium. And then between 2011 and about 2018 was me in quiet moments, fiddling with them, getting them in time. I mean, basically, it's boring, but basically, it was thousands of hours of fiddling about with the tapes to get them to be in time.
Oh, I bet, right? Because it was all recorded. Yeah, you said a 4-track or something. So then it's like you got, or 8-track. You got to then have it all digitized and then drop and try to get it so everything lines up and makes sense. Yeah. And I could imagine that being such a nightmare.
It's a nightmare in a way, but I think one of the things that anybody involved in making music on a computer will tell you is if you're not absolutely firing on all creative cylinders, there is definite pleasure to be had in the Excel spreadsheet that is a DAW. I mean, it is whatever people say about it, it's kind of admin and it's kind of okay. It's soothing. You can make progress doing kind of admin things, and you come away feeling like you've done a day, or you spent a good couple of hours or whatever. Sure. So whether it was in hotel rooms or here in my music room at home or wherever it would be in my old house, Salt was slowly like a slug moving towards being, better to be released. And then in 2018, I had a serious conversation with Bob. Okay, I really want to get this finished. What are we going to do? I've got it all in time. I've got it all in tune. And he said, I don't want to be involved in it for whatever reason. He had his own things going on.
But wow! So after all that time, he didn't even want to finish it.
Yeah, I still don't really, but Bob's got his own thing going on. Believe me, he's got plenty of stuff to do, and he also, I think, felt slightly embarrassed that this thing that he'd done 20 years before, effectively, was being thought about as a release, because I think he felt a bit self-conscious about the production that was on it, whereas I thought, whatever it is, what it is, whatever I sounded like back then, it's naive and simplistic in so many ways, but it is charming too. Right. But anyway, he said, why don't you get Tim, when we did acoustic, I don't know if you're familiar with Above and Beyond acoustic, but.
Oh, yeah, I am.
Yeah. The multi-instrumentalist, trumpet playing, keyboard playing, guitar playing, backing vocalist guy, Tim, he on Bob's request re-recorded some acoustic guitars, some electric guitars, and loads of backing vocals to add to what was on the 7 tracks that we had from the original recordings.
Okay.
To make it, just to add some top end, because the tape medium is famously not very sharp at the top end. And we've got used to the sound of digital recording. So Bob thought it would be nice to have some of that fairy dust in there. So everything that you hear on the record is the original 7 tracks front and center, and then augmented by some re-records. But basically it sounds the same as it did back then.
Wow.
Better.
So obviously with Above and Beyond, it started then with just doing the remixes.
We started as a remix group, and I had no idea when we started that songs that I might write along the lines of the songs that I've been writing about Shelley would have any place in Above and Beyond. It was something I don't think it didn't really occur to me. I'm listening to trance records. Silence by Sarah McLachlan, I think, was the biggest kind of example in the genre of this is what a vocal sounds like. I had no idea what she was singing about, but it sounded very dramatic, and it's from a female's point of view. I didn't hear my voice. I didn't hear the voice of Salt anywhere in the world. It wasn't being represented. All the trance songs were sung by women. And they were all about angels, wings, and all sorts of whatever they might be about, sky high fly. Yeah. And then one day sort of we're into the process by a few years now, so maybe 2002, I'm guessing. We'd already done Clear Blue Water with Ocean Lab, which again was a kind of a fantasy act, pretending that Justine was a mermaid singing about, come down into the water and you can breathe and all of that stuff. Nothing to do with, breakup. So I come home from a weekend with my girlfriend, come to the studio on the Monday, and there was this sort of backing track that Jono had been working on. And I started singing on top of it, and it was Far From In Love, which was exactly like any of the songs off Salt. It was one of those kind of existential white soul music, I call it, this kind of like, whoa, where am I? Self-examination sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it sounded pretty good. Far From In Love sounded like a good title. I always like to write songs that you can't Google and find. Nobody had written a song called Far From In Love, so that was good, and it meant something, but I wasn't sure what it meant, so it was cool. Mm-hmm. But then obviously the first thing we did with it was get a girl to sing it, because that's what you did. And nobody, the band, even I remember Paavo talking about, Paavo wasn't at all sure whether sad lyrics would be part of somebody's Friday night. Surely they're going out to have a good time. They want to forget the troubles and everything else. And this is a bit of a downer. And then I was determined to sort of prove that premise false. So I started doing a bit of research, and I discovered that Silence by Sarah McLachlan is a song about rape.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
And a song that we've been asked to remix by Ian Van Dahl. When you listen to the lyrics, it's exactly like Far From In Love. It's a sad love song. This is where we're at. So I was like, this is a bit of a surprise to me, but I think this is exactly what we should be doing. And it really clicked on Alone Tonight. Alone Tonight was the first one that we wrote, again, same kind of subject matter, but sung by a man. We found this guy, because I mean, obviously I could sing, but nobody wanted me to be the singer of Above and Beyond for whatever reason. And we were working with this guy called Dan, and he brought in a CD, and the CD said I think it said Silver Stars something or other, and Silver Stars is one of the lyrics in Far From It in Alone Tonight. Slipping sideways, silver stars collide. And I was like, it's written in the stars. This is the voice of Above and Beyond. Let's get him to sing it. So we sent him the song, and then he came down and sang Alone Tonight. And I think that for me was that we were talking earlier on about having a voice and having it be genuine. That it felt to me like when we played that at Global Gathering, there was this 6,000 blokes singing the whoa part of it. There's a whoa part in it. And I remember I get goosebumps thinking about it now. That was when the penny dropped for me. I thought, we're onto something here. This could be a voice. Uh-huh. And then we found Zoe Johnston. Zoe Johnston had written a song for Faithless called Crazy English Summer, which contains the line, sometimes I feel that I'm glad to be free. Sometimes I just want your arms around me. And I thought, she's the female part of the voice. This is perfect. So we chased her down, and she eventually sang No One on Earth for us, and has been with us ever since.
Wow.
And so I think between the two main voices there, it's on the same lines. They're personal songs. They're often dealing with sad things that have happened, people dying, girlfriends going off, whatever it might be. But what they're not is, they're not, Shake Your Booty. They're not Another Friday Night. They're not, it's not club music. It's existential white soul music. It's kind of how I describe it. It's that kind of self-examination, sad, personal, small subject matter, but with a chorus that is full of hope and consequently fills the big room. That's the kind of formula in a nutshell.
Mhm.
Um,
When did you
yeah.
kind of get drawn to dance music? I mean, obviously, what you were doing before with your bands and even that record, I mean, Salt, when you write Salt, that doesn't have that vibe, right?
No, not at all. I was very aware of dance music. I mean, dance music was blowing up all around me when I was working at Warner's for the last 5 years of my time there. I was in it though, because the end of 1994, I went with my brother and Shelley to the Ministry of Sound and took an tablet. And I think my view of the world changed instantly, which that stuff can do. I mean, it is an extraordinary. I wouldn't, I'm not saying you need to do it in your life, but if you do, I think you have generally you have that same road to Damascus experience. Sorry to use a biblical analogy, but I think suddenly you're confronted in a room full of people and your ego isn't there for the first time in your life. That is, it's profound.
Right.
It's
That's
you
wild,
normally
right?
you go out, you maybe have a few beers to feel more courage, to feel more defensive, to feel more aggressive. But really you're just thinking about yourself 90% of the time when you're out there. You go and take an ecstasy tablet and you go out and you don't think about yourself. You think about everybody else there, all these wonderful people. Suddenly the room is full of your next best friend. Suddenly there's this whole other thing, it's not a confidence, it's a ambivalence towards, do I look stupid? I don't care. Am I dancing
Right.
stupid? I don't care.
Mhm.
And I think that obviously changed my view of dance music too, because I suddenly saw it as a place and as a community where that kind of thinking could take hold. And that was insanely profound for me. I'm not saying I'm a deep thinker, but I think a lot about things. And to have that change in environment, my dad was a drinker, my sister's a drinker. I've always, I've liked alcohol, but I hate being drunk. It's been a bit of a battle for me because I know genetically I'm probably, Irish and all
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I could go that way, but there's stuff about it that's really under the fighting at the end of the night, whatever form that takes, is an kind of inevitable consequence of a beard up place. Hugging is an inevitable consequence of an ecstasy filled club. And there was this time in London in the 90s where there was this large underground movement of people who were out doing it weekly. And it was an extraordinary thing to be a part of.
Mhm.
There have been a few movies that have tried to capture it, but I don't think anything's really got close to the feeling of
Yeah.
what it felt like to be in this sort of slightly underground, but if you recognize the signs, you recognize the signs. You could go out to Covent Garden on a Sunday. Covent Garden is this, I don't know if you've been to London, but it's this
I
sort of
haven't.
kind of outdoor, mostly connection of shops and cafes and whatever else. And you could be sitting in a cafe and look right across the thing to see somebody on a Sunday afternoon and they've been out the night before and you could just tell. You just,
Yeah, you're like,
they,
ugh.
and you'd smile and they'd smile back. And it was great. So, yeah, I mean, it was that was kind of that was the
No.
time when Salt was coming together when I was doing that. I think once Above and Beyond started, there wasn't the time and there wasn't the opportunity to go clubbing anymore in the way that I used to.
Sure, sure.
Um, Especially as the most important question back in the day used to be, "Hello, mate, where you from? What do you do?" And I can't do that anymore because
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
knows who I am. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
anyway, I
100%.
digress. I digress.
No,
So
no, no. So yeah, so obviously Above and Beyond takes off, And then, but you were able to kind of recover these tapes and put it together and put it in time. And then 2018 rolls around and you're like, let's work on this.
Yeah.
Why do you decide now to put it out? I mean, that was still 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was. It took a while for Tim to do what he was going to do, and then lockdown happened. So there
Yeah.
was this.
I forgot about those couple of years that we
Yeah,
couldn't do
it's
shit.
funny. It's. I remember going through some dates with people, and somebody was like, "Why did that happen then?" You know, we forget
Yeah.
what happened. But 2020 came, and everything stopped. There was no Above and Beyond. There was no touring. I
Yeah.
started doing deep sets from my kitchen table downstairs. But then I thought I can get some stuff happening on Salt now. So there's a guy in America that I was put onto by Andrew Bayer who could do live strings. So I got the synth strings replaced by live strings during lockdown. And again, thinking it'll come out someday, but no real firm time. And then after lockdown, Jono did Joda, Parvo
Yeah.
did POS, and I thought, here's one I made earlier.
Okay. So when they were working on those projects, you went back to Salt.
I thought I need to have a response. You know, I can't be the guy who doesn't put out a solo record. And so luckily, here's one I have prepared earlier.
Love it.
And so I talked to the guys at the label, and I said, you know, it's not the same as Joda. It's not the same as POS. This is more like an acoustic record. It's produced by the producer of the acoustic record, so I feel it's part of the family. But it's a bit of a stretch for Anjunabeats. Do we feel we can put it out? And everybody agreed that it should come out on Anjunabeats.
Yeah, I love
so
that
it
you're
did.
doing it through that label. That's so cool.
I mean, it was always our intention that we could release anything on Anjunabeats. I mean, obviously, Anjunadeep has taken a part of what we do away, and I think that's understandable and it makes sense in so many ways. But I think ultimately, if we could have put everything out on Anjunabeats, that would have been, for me as OCD kind of a person, more complete. You know, I think sub brands are great, but I think Yamaha proves that you can make a motorbike or a piano or a guitar or a car or whatever, and you don't need to change the name if what you do is great. But anyway, again, I digress.
Are you doing shows for these songs, or is it just kind of like this was a project that
No, I'm not.
has
I'm not doing
taken
shows.
these
It's one
years?
of those things. I sort of feel like this is the first time in my life when, aside from the period when I was seeing Shelley and writing the songs and performing them for anybody who would listen, I take my guitar to overnight parties and play them to people. And now I've always been in bands, and you share the front of the stage with other people, and that feels very comfortable to me. To be the guy, don't know. I feel slightly embarrassed by it also. No, I'm not going to be doing any shows. I didn't think I could still sing these songs because my voice has got a lot lower than it was in 1995. But actually, when I did the video for Biker Babe, I found myself singing along with no problem at all. So who knows? Maybe I'd like to do it on the scale of acoustic. To me, the sound of the record is very rich, and I could just stand there and strum the guitar and sing the songs. But I think without the great bass lines, without the strings, without the backing vocals, it wouldn't really be Salt. Salt has got a vibe, and it would need 6 or 7 people, I think, to make it happen. That's expensive. No
Yeah.
plans at the moment.
Yeah, no plans to just go out and tour it on a stool
No,
or
no,
whatever.
no,
Like, yeah,
no.
okay.
It's
I
a,
do love
it's
that
a.
video you did though.
Thank
Oh,
you. I mean,
yeah.
I did. We spent the money on the video because I think I won't be playing it live, and this, gives you an idea of what it might look like if I did.
Yeah.
And I think
Did in like a little club, right? It looks like a little club.
Yeah, it's in a club in London. But the idea was
Cool.
that it was an episode of Twin Peaks. I don't know if you know the
Yeah,
TV show.
I do.
So the last series they would have a musical act playing at the Roadhouse.
Hmm.
So it was, supposed to be, that's the point of it, because the song itself is pretending that I was in an episode of Twin Peaks with Shelley. That was, because she was a waitress from Seattle, and there is a
Interesting.
waitress in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And it's got Twin Peaks guitar in it, and it's just, it was a fantasy of mine to see it on the screen as I have been seeing it in my head. It was, I think, we don't make a lot of videos, and they're very, very difficult to make on point, and that was definitely on point. I think it's a really great video.
Yeah, I love it. And dude, I appreciate your time, Tony. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I think it's such an awesome album. I love that there's that style of music. I mean, the acoustic guitars and just like the melodic pieces to it. I think it's such a cool album. And
Thank
obviously
you.
what you're doing with Above and Beyond is above and beyond and amazing.
Thank you very
But
much.
I have one more question for you. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Find your voice. Be different. And I think have confidence that what you're feeling, other people will feel too. So don't be afraid to empty it all out. You don't have to live up to anything. Everybody has the same, well, not the same, but enough people to give you a career will feel the same way as you do. Bring me a bad word.